Thanks for joining us today. What we were talking about is what's new in ISE 3.2. We already went through part one. We basically divided these features introduced in ISE 3.2 into two parts. And the first part was already done during the June 2nd. And today we're going to talk about the remaining features which were introduced in the ISE 3.2 beta. Now, this is the theme of ISE 3.2. Basically, ISE 3.2 was built based on these four pillars. ISE 3.2 can be deployed flexibly, offers more compliance options, provides open data access, and offers improved analytics and reporting. Now, let's get into each and every feature, and along with the features, we do have the demonstrations as well for some of the features. Now, the first and foremost one is the viewing the Cisco ISE UI in the dark mode. You might be surprised to hear that we got a lot of feedback asking for this feature from our community as well as the feedback. So there is a solution already available in 3.2. Each and every administrator who is logging into ISE, he can set his own preference, whether to view it in the light mode or a dark mode, and then the save settings as per his preference. Now let's get into the demonstrating how we can enable it. Of course, this is going to be much simple, and I'm going to make use of my ISE 3.2. I'm logging in as a super admin into ISE. And once after login, go to the settings, click account settings. And by default, you would see that the default theme was enabled, which is in light mode. You can actually set it to dark mode and save these settings. This settings the preference settings saved is going to be per account basis, per user basis, and everything is going to show up in the dark mode, like operation live logs. And you can go to the dashboard as you have seen it already, endpoints dashboard, guest dashboard, so on and so forth. And everything is going to be viewed in the dark mode itself. Now, these are basically settings available for each and every administrator, like I said earlier. So I'm going to demonstrate how do you even enable such kind of a setting or enable dark mode for an Active Directory user. So I'm logging into the same ISE using the Active Directory. And then I'm going to the account settings. So instead of default theme, I'm going to make use of a dark theme and save the preference. Now, once after setting the preference, obviously, you're going to see the ISE UI in the dark mode. That's how you can basically set your preference under account settings page. Now, let's go to the second feature, which is called a Cisco Secure Client, which is a rebranded version of AnyConnect. The AnyConnect is rebranded to Cisco Secure Client because the customers wanted to get the unified modular client experience across all Cisco security platforms. You know, the AnyConnect was already modular in nature. It was having the VPN agent, ISE posture agent, umbrella roaming clients, even the firewall, AMP, so on and so forth. These are modules available in the AnyConnect, which you can install it. But there are some places where the end user experience is a little different from the AnyConnect, and when you're specifically using the different agents from different Cisco security products. The idea is to give the same kind of a user experience across all Cisco secure products. That's the reason why it was rebranded to Cisco Secure Client, and the version is going to be starting from 5.0. Where the Windows version of Cisco Secure Client is going to be released during July timeframe. That's a tentative at this point of time. and followed by the Mac and the Linux operating systems, Cisco Secure Client version is going to be available. Android and iOS versions are already available in the respective marketplaces. You can basically experience from the Cisco Secure Client. When we were rebranding it, it's not only the name that we were rebranding it, it's everything that we were getting modified. Let it be the module names, installers, service names, log names, directories, registries, anything what you would say, everything is going to be changed. For instance, Cisco AnyConnect Secure Mobility Client is now going to be called as Cisco Secure Client AnyConnect VPN. After all, AnyConnect VPN is the one which is the basic core functionality which enables you to install all other modules on top of it. The Dart one, Cisco AnyConnect Dart, is going to be called as Cisco Secure Client, the Dart. So we kept most of the names as is, but for some modules, like for example, Cisco AnyConnect posture module for the firewalls, now going to be called as Cisco Secure Client Secure Firewall Posture. In order to differentiate from the ISE posture, we were renaming it to Secure Firewall Posture Module. And Umbrella Roaming Security Module is renamed just to Cisco Secure Client Umbrella. Whenever you're trying to download AnyConnect packages or Cisco Secure Client packages from software.cisco.com, you can basically refer to different names. So you can download the AnyConnect as well as the Cisco Secure Client now, just to differentiate what client that you wanted to make use of. And there are some changes also made into ISE to refer to agent in generic way rather than talking about AnyConnect or Cisco Secure Client in a specific fashion. So we're going to go through that during the demonstration as well. So you might be wondering, how could I even upgrade my existing Cisco AnyConnect 4.x versions to Cisco Secure Client 5.x? Of course, you can do that without any restrictions. Provided the Cisco Secure Client has to have the latest compliance module. Whatever the deployment methods that you were making use of earlier to deploy the AnyConnect, the same deployment methods are going to be applied to the Cisco Secure Client also. Be it you're making use of an SCCM or software management systems or group policies, Cisco ISE or Cisco Secure Firewall, so on and so forth. Whatever ways that you are trying to deploy the AnyConnect, the same methods are going to be applied for you to deploy the Cisco Secure Client. Now let's go through the demo. How do we deploy Cisco Secure Client from ISE straight away? Now I'm logging into Cisco ISE, and first and foremost thing is to upload the resources. And go to the client provisioning resources. Sorry. You might notice here, instead of actually AnyConnect reference, we made it in a generic fashion. From an ISE posture standpoint, except the rebranding, everything is going to remain the same as is. And the UI changes were there just to give you the feeling that you're trying to deploy. Doesn't matter whether it is AnyConnect that you wanted to deploy or Cisco Secure Client that you wanted to deploy, we were making it generic like an agent. Now with that, I'm going to be first uploading the Cisco Secure Client from the local disk. I'm going to select the Cisco provided packages, select the Cisco Secure Client package, and then submit the configuration, confirm the checksum. Now let's add Cisco Secure Client Compliance Module package as well. Submit the configuration, confirm the checksum. Now that you have uploaded the required Cisco resources, secure client resources, you have to define the agent configuration. like we were doing it to deploy for AnyConnect, we were doing for the same for Cisco Secure Client as well. So let's give it a name by selecting Cisco Secure Client for desktop. Select the compliance module, respective compliance module. Along with the VPN and posture module, I wanted to deploy the diagnostic and reporting tool also. So I'm going to be making use of AnyConnect profile itself, which is applicable for this Cisco Secure Client as well. Now that you have defined the agent configuration that you require to deploy the Cisco Secure Client, let's define the client provisioning policies. We have already Windows policies to deploy the AnyConnect 4.10 so far. Now you can actually deploy Cisco Secure Client for the Windows to upgrade it to 4.10 if they had it. If they don't have it, it's going to get installed for the first time. Let's review the posture policy sets also. So let's go to the employee posture policy set. What I'm doing here is basically as long as the user is part of Active Directory posture group and initially getting authenticated, then we were trying to redirect them to the posture unknown access profile, which gets redirected to client provisioning page to download the secure client. If at all it is compliant against posture policies, it's going to get compliant access. If at all it is non-compliant, then it's going to get restricted access. That's how we created the policy sets for the uh, posture endpoints. Let's run with the Windows 10 endpoint. Let's run a round trip with the Windows 10 endpoint. This Windows 10 endpoint was already joined to the Active Directory, so I'm logging into the Windows machine using the Active Directory user. Once after login, initiate the browser. The browser was already asking me to redirect, so I got redirected to the client provisioning page. I'm going to start the device security check to detect whether an existing agent was already installed and running. Because this is the first time that I'm trying to download and install it, I'm going to click on, this is my first time here, and click to download the Network Setup Assistant. Once downloaded, run the Network Setup Assistant and connect to ISE. And Network Setup Assistant now pulls the required packages for it to install. So now it tries to connect it to the ISE, validates the client provisioning policies that we have defined, downloads the required packages and the agent profiles as well, and installs them. Downloading, it's installing at this point of a time. It's installing now Dart bundle. Now it's completed. So the installation was completed. Let's close that and let's open the Cisco Secure Client. Now this is what the Cisco Secure Client UI is. A little different from the AnyConnect and the brand standpoint as well. And the nature of and how the ISE posture works, that's the same way the Cisco Secure Client also works. But this is where the difference comes into play, where it is truly modular in structure. Now you can come and click on the About section of the Cisco Secure Client to know what version of each module that it is installed with. That is how it is truly making it to the Cisco's secure client as a modular one. Now that we have seen how do we deploy the Cisco secure client to the endpoints, let's get into the another feature called the posture script condition. A little background about this posture script condition, why we introduced this posture script condition. The endpoints going through the compliance check through the posture service, using the posture service, administrator can create the posture policies to look for the compliance of an endpoint using the natively available posture checks, be it anti-malware installation, definition, patch management, firewall, so on and so forth. Those are natively available in Cisco ISE for you to meet the compliance requirements. But for some instances and for some customers, the compliance check that they were looking for is not uh, cannot be deployed using the predefined or the natively available uh, checks, the posture checks. So in that case, how do they even actually check for the compliance of an endpoint without compromising on the compliance or the security of their organization? The solution is posture script condition. So along with an existing natively supported posture checks, we introduced a posture script condition, which allows AnyConnect 4.10 MR5 onwards to run the script that you're uploading it to ISE, and it runs on the endpoint. And once the script execution was successful, based on the exit codes, it's going to give the result back to the ISE looking for any arbitrary compliance check. Be it, say for instance, if I wanted to know whether the endpoints connecting to the network are managed or unmanaged. Just for an auditing purpose, I don't want to give any remediation to it. Just for an auditing purpose, out of 100 devices that got connected to my network, how much percentage of devices are managed versus non-managed? Are all corporate CA certificates are installed in the endpoint? If not, can I give a remediation associated with it? For all of this to work, for a security standpoint, from the security standpoint, AnyConnect local policy.xml file has to have the Cisco ISE certificates SHA-256 fingerprint. So the reason behind that is when the AnyConnect gets the script to execute it, it validates whether it is trusted to execute it is not signed as I meant by it's not I'm not I'm not saying it is signed by the Cisco ISE certificate. It is basically in order for the AnyConnect or secure client to execute the posture script condition, it first of all has to trust the ISE certificate as well. That's the precondition that we need to keep it in mind. And this AnyConnect local policy.xml file, it should be deployed not from the ISE, it should be deployed from the other software distribution methods. Now, let's go through the demonstration. During the demonstration, I'm going to define two script-based conditions. One is to check whether the endpoint connecting to the network is a domain-managed PC or not, just for an auditing purpose. Because it is an auditing purpose, I don't want to associate any remediation to it. The next script-based condition that I'm looking for is whether the endpoint was having all the necessary corporate CS certificate installed in the trusted store list. If not, I wanted to update or give the remediation to update through the group policies. That's what I'm going to actually go through the demo. I've connected to ISE. Now, the first and foremost thing, go to the ISE conditions, policy elements conditions, expand the posture conditions. As I said earlier, you have already natively available posture checks to look for anti-malware application, disk encryption, file fingerprint, firewall, retrieve the hardware attributes, registry checks, service, USB. Along with all these natively available one, what we had now is a script-based condition. Let's add a new script-based condition. Let's provide a name called domain managed PC. That's the first script-based condition I'm defining here. Let's select the Windows operating system. That's what I'm making use for the demo purpose. The script type, you can run PowerShell script or PowerShell core scripts on the Windows endpoints. I'm making use of PowerShell script, and let's select that script, PowerShell script. And the next option is the timeout, the 5 seconds that we were referring here. This 5 seconds is nothing but the script, how much time the AnyConnect or the Cisco secure client has to wait for that script to be executed successfully. So I'm giving a 5 seconds default one to run the script. The script is very simple, so it should be running within a couple of milliseconds itself. So I'm fine with the default timeout there. The next one is a script condition execution failure. In case if the script executed on the endpoint, but it fails, or it runs into issues with the timeout, then whether I want AnyConnect or Cisco Secure Client to report it as failure or report it as passed, I could set that option. I want, of course, I want as a security measurement, of course, I wanted to ask my AnyConnect or a Cisco Secure Client to send, in case if the script execution got failed, I wanted to send it as failed itself. Then the next one is Windows PowerShell execution policy, bypass all signed and none. Because it is not the signed certificate that you're making use of, I want to just bypass it. And I could run the script using the administrative privileges or the user privileges. Because the agent running on the endpoint is already at the system level. It has both the privileges, administrative privileges and user privileges. The script that you're uploading, whether it requires an administrative privileges to execute it, or whether it is just requires a logged in user privileges, is fine. That's what you need to select. You got selected that, and now let's select one more script condition to look for the enterprise root CA certificates installed in the trust node or not. Be the operating system as is. Select the PowerShell script. I'm going to show you what that script is also. Let the defaults values as is and save the configuration. Now, when the endpoint doesn't have the enterprise root CA certificates installed, I wanted to actually give a remediation to the endpoints also. Through the group update group policy, I wanted to actually update the trusted root certificates. And same over here on a Windows, when it is failed, I wanted to run it. And it should run at the system privileges level by giving an interval of 5 and retry count of 2. Now that we have created these conditions and remediations, let's go ahead and look what is that SHA-256 fingerprint that has to be available in AnyConnect local XML file. Now, in order for the agent to execute these scripts, the SHA-256 ISE certificate SHA-256 fingerprint has to be made available under AnyConnect local policy XML file. This is for the security purpose. You don't want to run any arbitrary scripts from anyone else, right? That's the reason why we introduced this one. How do we do that? So we have already defined a way here. So gather the SHA-256 fingerprint of an ISE and put it into AnyConnect local policy XML. Now you might be having a question, what ISE certificate that I'm referring to? Is it an admin certificate or a portal certificate? It is the portal certificate that I'm referring here. The reason behind that is AnyConnect or the secure client always talks to the 8443 port, by default port, until and unless you modify it. And it is associated with the portal certificate. That portal certificate can be a default self-signed or can be a certificate issued from the root certificate authorities or enterprise root CA. So you can have either the default self-signed certificate if your ISE is a default to a self-signed certificate one, or you can have a fingerprint of your root certificate authority itself there in the AnyConnect local policy XML file to trust the fingerprint and execute the script. This is the precondition that we need to execute. Let's come back to the ISE and let's look at the posture policies defined using these script-based conditions. Now, I'm going to actually show you these script that I was making use of. This is where the first script I was making use of. My domain is a dominion.in. I'm anticipating that my managed PC, if at all it is managed from dominion.in or not. If so, then I'm exiting with a 0 success code. If not, I'm exiting with 1 failure code. So basically, when any connector or the secure client gets the script executed, it returns exit 0 or exit 1. If at all it is managed, it's going to get the exit 0. If at all it's not unmanaged, then it's going to. This is the second script where I'm looking for the root certificate, enterprise root CA certificate, whether they are got installed on the endpoint trusted certificate store or not. If they are available, I'm looking for that specific thumbprint of that root CA certificate. If it exists, then I'm gonna be exiting with 0 success code. If not, I'm exiting with 1 failure code. If the endpoint doesn't have the required certificate, then I wanted to give the remediation to it as well. The remediation could be something to update on the group policy. So I'm updating through the group policies to install the root enterprise root CA certificates on the endpoint. And once the root CA certificates were executed, it's gonna. So you might be wondering now, what are those exit codes, right? Those exit codes are basically for you to refer whether the script execution was successful or failed, or even the download was failed itself, or is there any tampering happened on it or not. So these are the exit codes that we have in whenever the script execution was happening. So when it returns 0, that means script execution was successful and it exited with a 0 code. If it is greater than 0, that means script execution was successful. However, the exit code returned failure. -1 refers to script execution check wasn't even attempted. Data integrity, error in script download, so on and so forth. So these are basically the codes available for you to know whether the script execution was successful or failed. Now that you know what we have written, let's review the posture policies. So we got two posture policies, which is looking for domain managed PC policy and root CA install policy, which is associated with a requirement, domain managed PC requirement and root CA install requirement. Let's go to the requirement and verify what conditions and the remediations associated with it. So the domain managed PC requirement was associated with the domain managed PC check. And because it is an auditing purpose, I'm not making use of any remediation here. It's just for an auditing purpose. The next one is root CA install certificate check, whether the enterprise root CAs are existing in the endpoint or not. If not, I'm updating through the group policies. Now that we have defined the required posture policies, let's run the round trip using Windows 10 endpoint, the same endpoint, which got the compliant access earlier, right? Now let's click on scan again button, which will uh, allow the Cisco secure client to connect to the endpoint, ISE, and retrieve the posture policies and validate. Now that it was run successfully, let's go to the posture script condition report. This was the new report introduced in ISE 3.2 to know whether the condition, the script check was executed successfully or not. If at all it is successfully executed, it's going to show the status that is script execution success. It shows the policy name, condition name, so on and so forth, the requirement and if at all, uh, we were looking for those two checks, right? Those were passed, and if at all it is not attempted, you're going to see the status something like this. If it is failed, then you're going to see something like this. If you try to access posture assessment by condition, this will also let you know whether your script-based condition was passed or failed. The use case what I was trying to derive here is I wanted to understand out of 100 endpoints connecting to the network, how much percentage of devices were managed versus unmanaged. So I can filter out based on this check whether it is failed or passed, I would come to know how many endpoints are managed versus unmanaged. That's the that's one example. That's one use case that I was trying to derive it. Now that's basically the posture script-based condition feature. Let's go to the next feature called the data connect. The data connect, why we came up with the data connect? The purpose is here The ISE was already offering you the predefined reports, dashboards, dashlids, context visibility reports, and everything. What if the customer was looking for a report with he wanted to customize his own report? He wanted to club two reports together and get the summary out of it. Or he wanted to create his own authentication summary kind of a report of his own. Or he wanted to create his own dashboard based on the reports or ISE database, ISE data. These are, well, that's not possible because ISE was offering predefined reports here. You can filter it out based on the columns available. Those columns are predefined. You cannot add or you cannot remove it. You can basically export it, all the information through the CSV, and you have to trim it down. But that's not what you were looking for day-to-day operations, right? What if I wanted to customize my own report, or I wanted to show my own columns in that report? I wanted to create my own dashboard using that itself. So with the Data Connect, through the third-party tools such as Power BI, Tableau, Kibana, and Excel SQL Developer, using those third-party tools, you can directly connect it to the ISE database and get the operational configuration endpoint data. After all, it's your data, the operation configuration endpoint data that you are looking for. And now with this Data Connect feature, the third-party tools can connect to the ISE database and query the required query based on your requirement and get the information out of ISE. That is the reason why the name of the feature also says the Data Connect. Through the third-party tools, you're trying to connect to the ISE database and getting the data out of the ISE. Now, then where do I need to connect to? It runs on the MNT database, and it is in the read-only fashion. The user that you're trying to connect it using the user that you're trying to make use of to connect to the ISE database is in a read-only mode account. So you cannot literally change anything. So you don't have to worry about the configuration changes there. The second thing is it runs on the MNT, and you need to connect your third-party tools to MNT, preferably secondary MNT, because you might be querying a lot of information from the ISE. Essential license is what basically requires for you to exercise this feature. And talking about security, when you're connecting the third-party tools to the ISE database, we need that connection to be secure. It is made possible with the help of Data Connect certificate. So you need to export that Data Connect certificate and make it trusted in the third-party tools whenever it is connecting to the ISE database over TCPS protocol. So let's go through the demonstration. I'm making use of an SQL developer tool to connect to the ISE database securely in a read-only fashion with a read-only account, and then get the required reports. So this is my ISE. Let's see how we could enable this feature first of all. So let's go to the first of all operations, reports. So these are the reports, the predefined reports available. For some customers, they wanted to actually customize their own report with their own columns alone. These are predefined reports, and sometimes they wanted to club both the reports together and get meaningful information. Sometimes they wanted to get more than what is available in ISE. So in order for them engineering to add one extra column, it is going to take its own time. Instead, if we give the access to the ISE database, then using the third-party tools, you can connect to the ISE database, query the required columns available, and then get the report of whatever you are looking for. That's the intent of Data Connect feature. Now let's see how we can enable it. By default, this is not going to be enabled. You need to go to the administrator, system, settings, Data Connect. By default, it is not enabled. This is where you can enable it. Of course, through UI and through APIs or also you can enable it. Once it is enabled, you can provide the password, and the password criteria can be 12 to 30 characters. It should contain the capital, small letters, and even special characters. The password expiry, you can set the password expiry as well and save the configuration. Now, once it is saved, using this username called Data Connect, you can connect to the ISE database. This is nothing but MNT on the port 2484 with the service name CPM10. So whenever an account gets logged or whenever the password gets expired, one has to change the password and save the configuration to reset the connection. So that's how you can basically, in case if at all the user account was locked because of excessive failure authentication attempts or the password expiry, you can change the password and get it working by saving the configuration again. I mean, by modifying the password. So the another thing to notice there is the Data Connect certificate. So using this certificate, you need to basically make use of trust that certificate in the third-party tool. I'm making use of an SQL developer. For me to connect, for the SQL developer tool to connect to the ISE database securely, I need to generate, just a minute. I need to generate a key store. So using the Data Connect certificate PEM file that I exported, I'm generating the key store here, and I'm setting the password, key store password, and I'm trusting this certificate at my system level. And I'm going and modifying the SQL configuration file in order for the SQL developer tool to connect it to the ISE database securely using this key store that you generated. So you need to add these fields in order for the say SQL developer tool to connect the ISE database securely. What we were referring here is, hey, use this key JKS key store and the password for it to access that key store. That's how we were mentioning it. And then we were going to the SQL developer and let's add a connection to it. Let's provide some name, ISE demo. The username would be always the Data Connect. Sorry. Provide the password that you have configured into the GUI or the API. Save the password if you want, and then instead of selecting basic, select the custom JDBC because it is not the plain connection that you're making it to the ISE database. Provide the ISE host name, IP address or host name, and the protocol TCPS, and the CPM 2484 port number, and the CPM service name, and save this connection, and let's connect to the database. Now let's expand the views. So these are the tables available for you to query upon. There are a lot of tables available, like radius authentication table, which has these columns available. And let's do some queries. I do have some queries already available. So I was trying to actually get the records available under the radius authentications table. Now that the SQL developer was connected successfully to the ISE database, I wanted to retrieve the records available in my ISE database under the radius authentications. Let's run that, and it gives me the records available in that under that table. It gives me username, user type, identity group, device name, device type, location, NAS IP address, so on and so forth. So all the columns available. If I wanted to actually order it by the timestamp in a descending order, I can do so using this query. And if I want the number of radius authentication records available in my ISE before the purge, I could do so. There are around 22,415 records, radius authentication records available. I don't want to show all the columns, but I wanted to show only the specific columns like username, endpoint, profile, so on and so forth from the radius authentication. So it's going to show me only those three selected columns. If I wanted to get not specific, unique calling station IDs from the radius authentication table, I could get that. So these are the unique calling station IDs available in the radius authentication table. And if I wanted to get the radius authentication records from a specific MAC address, I could specify calling station ID, filter on based on the calling station ID, query it, and hopefully it will get the 4 records. I can get it from the timestamp. I could also, if at all I'm interested to retrieve the records, radius authentication records happening from the wide environment, which is nothing but NAS port type, I can do that using that query. So these are the endpoints authenticating over the wide network. If I wanted to run it over wireless, I can do so using this query. And the next one is the interesting one. My network access devices were spread across multiple locations. So I created different network NDGs like Paris, Florida Central, San Jose, so on and so forth. So if I want the radius authentications happening from a specific location called Paris, I could do so from this query. Let's run this query. And hopefully we should be able to find the radius authentication records happening from Paris location. Let's look at the count and group by location itself. So in the summary, I wanted to understand how many radius authentication records are coming from each location. So there are around 21,686 radius authentication records happening from all locations, 695 from San Jose. And if I want the unique user names from the radius authentication summary table, I could do so using this query. And I'm using the same radius authentication summary table. I'm basically retrieving the group locations information. So radius authentication summary table is different from radius authentication table, and it's gonna give me the location wise radius authentication records. So I could get it using the device type also. So you could see there are trust switches, wireless, wide, and even device name. I could group it using the security group tags. So there are endpoints matching with these security groups. So you could clearly see in my environment, TrustSec devices are the most matching ones. So from the endpoints data, this is a configuration data. Apart from radius authentication summary, which is an operational data, I'm trying to get endpoint policy available in the endpoints data table. So this one was giving me beautifully that, hey, there are 27 VMware devices and 4 Microsoft workstations, so on and so forth. And if I wanted to get the policy sets available in my ISE, I could do so. I could also get, there are some active and inactive ones available. Show me the active ones only. Show me the inactive ones only. So that's how basically we were trying to retrieve it. In the interest of time, I'm going to advance this and I'm going to basically go to a section where so I'm going to this is the Excel sheet. Even you can connect the Excel sheet to the ISE database and get the information. But in my environment, I was not able to do so, but I was trying to actually copy paste the information that I got it from the SQL developer and plotting the graphs around that information. So you basically can create your own dashboards and reporting whatever way you want. Even programmatically, you can query the ISE database and get the information. So you can clearly see that there are 92 radius authentication records happening from the Windows 10 workstation. 69 records were found from the Windows 11 workstation. These are the radius authentication records spread across multiple locations. You can clearly see that 21,686 radius authentication records happening from all location, and 741 happening from San Jose Building 5, 20 from, I think, default one, uh, 10 from Florida Central, and then 5 from Paris. And this is this was showing you the endpoint policy summary. In my IC database, you could clearly see that VMware devices are the most endpoint policies that are matching with, and 18% of them are matching with the Windows 10 workstation, and still there are 3% unknown devices in my environment. And this is a graph that was created based on the network access devices associated to specific location. There are two NATs under Florida South, two NATs under San Jose Building 5, and one from other locations. This is another in which the endpoints are mapped to an identity group. When they are dynamically profiled, they're going to be mapped dynamically or statically to an identity group, right? So the profiled ones are the most one, the workstations are the next highest identity group in my environment. And this is an interesting one, the endpoint summary through the probe information. So most of my endpoints are getting profiled through what probe? The radius probe. The reason behind that is I'm making use of a Cat9K switches and 9800 WLCs, which profiles the device using the network access device itself and then sends that information over the radius probe. That was the reason why I was having the radius probe, which is the maximum contributor for my endpoint profiles to profile the device. Now that's the power of a data connect feature. Now let's talk about the next feature called the infrastructure monitoring. And let's go to the fundamentals. Why do I even have to have the infrastructure monitoring when you have the system health summary available? Well, there is a reason behind that. The system health summary was showing you the CPU usage, disk usage, memory usage, IO, and etc. already available in the ISE system, but it is at the 60 minutes interval. If we were to actually change it to a lesser frequency, it would be huge data that we were collecting from ISE system, from each and every ISE system, and getting it to the Oracle DB, and so it has huge impact on the performance of an ISE. So how do I monitor my system health without compromising on the performance of my ISE? Now, well, in 3.2, we have the feature called infrastructure monitoring, which uses the Grafana as the front-end tool to create your own dashboards based on the ISE system health information and application KPIs like process, CPU, memory, disk utilization, etc. Now, I wanted to just show you how is it going to work even in behind the scenes. Basically, the node exporter is the one, it is a process running on each and every node in your ISE deployment. Be it a PAN, be it a PSN, be it MNT, be it PixGrid, whatever it is, the node exporter is going to be running on each and every node instance. And it's basically going to run, get the KPIs from the system health information, and it will the Prometheus is the one which collects all the information from each node exporter information. The Prometheus is builds the time series database on which you can make use of a Grafana as a front end to create your own dashboard. So basically, the Grafana was making use of a Prometheus time series database, which gathered the information from each and every node exporter process. So that's how you are basically creating your own infrastructuring monitoring dashboard from the PAN itself. Now, when do we need to make use of this infrastructure monitoring? It is basically, you can make use of this for your system health monitoring purpose. It runs for every 15 seconds at this point of a time. There is no customization to that 15 seconds at this point of time. Probably by end of GA, we're going to get the confirmation whether we can modify it or not. But at this point of time, 15 seconds is the interval through which each and every node exporter is going to send that information to the Prometheus, and Prometheus stores it in the time series database. And using the data that it collected, the Grafana can query and create the dashboard around it. Now let's go through the demo. Now basically I'm logging into ISE 3.2, go to the operations, monitoring, settings page. By default, this infrastructure monitoring is enabled by default. So you on the infrastructure monitoring, or you can go to the infrastructure monitoring just right away. So once after going to the infrastructure monitoring, you can browse for the existing dashboard. So we were providing the existing dashboards also. So this is the ISE dashboard, which gives you the KPIs of your system. So you can select the nodes. I have the only standalone node. That was the reason why. So it gives you the system, CPU, RAM, network, and disk in KPIs. My system is being up and running for the last 1.7 weeks, and it has 12 cores in it, 52% of RAM being used by my ISE, and how my network and the disk utilization there. So you can beautifully see how the CPU utilization was there, the disk utilization, the partition, slash board, slash temp, slash optop utilization, disk IOPS, latency, throughput, network, received versus transmitted bytes, even memory information, memory committed, and memory consumption. So we have already given you the ISE pre-existing dashboard. You can also create your own dashboard basically. So the Grafana was giving the capability for you to create your own dashboard using the Prometheus database, time series database. So how do I create my own dashboard? Let's go back and browse the ISE dashboard again. Let's go and browse the ISE dashboards. Let's create my dashboard, add a panel. Dashlet is nothing but here a panel. That's what it refers to. Under metrics browser, basically you need to provide what is the metric that you are, what is the KPI that you are referring. You might be referring to the node memory utilization. Let's select the memory total bytes. So you can select whatever time series or different graph. Because this is in bytes, I'm gonna actually set the unit to the bytes, and it gets updated. So 30 GB, around 30 GB is what it was showing, right? But time series is not a matter for me here. So if I show the statistics, it's 31.4 GB is what utilized by my allocated to my ISE. So if I like it, I can save this panel to my new dashboard. I can save the dashboard, and I can also give the panel name. Let's go to the panel title, modify the total RAM allocated, save the configuration, and go back and add one more panel if I want. Now this time, instead of actually selecting the KPI, how do we make use of a matrix browser technically? So you have these matrices available in the Prometheus database. These are the KPIs basically available. So you can make use of any of these KPIs to create your own graphs. So I'm going to show you the network transmitted versus received bytes. So I'm looking for node network transmitted total bytes. Network transmit bytes total. Yes. Once after that, I'm going to select on which device that I wanted to query on what instance and what job. Select the Ethernet interface, select the instance, select the job, and click on the use query. It builds the query automatically, and it builds the graph that you have selected. So it's showing me the network, the transmitted bytes basically from the ISE. Because it is in bytes, I'm going to actually set the unit to bytes. And I'm going to add received information as well. So I'm going to add one more query. And from the same metrics browser, I'm going to select the network, received total bytes, select the device, instance, job, select the interface, instance, and the job. Click on use query. It builds the query automatically. So click on use query, provide some legend, something like a received. So as and when I updated the query, the graph got updated, if you notice it. So received bytes. Now, this is not good way to have it in the time series, right? I don't want the time series graph here. I want something like a gauge graph. So if I select gauge, it automatically updates the query and gives you, hey, around 1.9 GB is being transmitted and 30 GB is around being received by the ISE for the last 30 minutes. So transmitted versus received network, provide some panel title, network transmitted versus received bytes, save the panel to the existing dashboard, apply it. So that's how basically you're gonna create your own dashboards and panels using the Grafana UI based on the KPIs available in the Prometheus time series database. Now let's get into the next feature called log analytics. This is a powerful feature. You might be wondering, can I get a radius authentication records? Can I get the radius authentication summaries, etc., so on and so forth? No. From the infrastructure monitoring, you can get only the system's health summary only, the process and applications and CPU memory by network and IO utilization. But whereas if you wanted to understand and create your own dashboard for log analytics purposes, you can make use of a log analytics. So for that reason, we introduced the Kibana as a UI, front-end UI. You know, the Kibana is a well-known tool for the log analytics purpose, and it gives you the capability to create your own dashboard based on the syslogs received from the ISE. So it all depends on the syslog processing within the ISE. Now, you don't have to depend on StealthWatch or the Splunk to analyze the ISE syslogs. It was inbuilt within the ISE now. It runs on the MNT database, and let me give you the details around it. It runs on the primary MNT database. As soon as the syslogs were received on the primary MNT, it gets collected on the ICE messaging service, and ICE messaging service sends it to the Oracle DB as well as to the Logstash. And Logstash basically formats it, puts it into Elasticsearch database, and then using the Elasticsearch database, the Kibana can be used as a front end to create your own dashboards and dashlets, which is available from the Pan UI. So the Kibana and the Grafana, when do I need to make use of? The Grafana, you need to make use of to plot graphs for getting the system health information on a time series data. That's when you're going to make use of Grafana. You might be having some question around, hey, uh, even the CPU system health information is being sent over the syslog currently. Is it not going to be available under log analytics from the Kibana? Yes. So there is an overlap, but the Kibana is more used for the log analytics, but Grafana is used mostly for the time series database for system health information. Now let's go through the demo to make it understand better. Logged into the ISE again, go to the operations. By default, this log analytics is not enabled. One has to enable it and save the configuration. Go to the log analytics, operations, log analytics, and go to the dashboard. And we were giving you some existing pre-built dashboards, something like ISE overview dashboard. The names are going to be changed during the GA timeframe, but at this point of time, ISE overview dashboard, it was giving you basically connected to the Kibana. The Kibana was getting the information on the Redis authentication records available from the ISE. So 1,389 total hits happened across my deployment, failed counts. The call check is the highest service type being used in my deployment, and the access switch -3K is the most used one. Internal endpoint store is the most matched identity store. My most of the endpoints are matching with the guest access policy set. And hit count per ISE, of course, I have only one single ISE. Otherwise, you could see a beautiful graph over there. The hit count per the network access device, you could see the access switch got more hit count, the internal endpoints versus identity store hit count, and even the authentication protocol hit count. So the PEEP authentications are around 240, lookups are 1051, so on and so forth. So you can create your own dashboard as well from the Kibana. But in order for you to create your own dashboard, first of all, you need to create the index patterns. What does the index patterns are? The index patterns are basically for you to get the information. It already got the information, but you need to make it available for the Kibana to query upon. So we have these index counters called ISE counter, process status, radius accounting, authentication, system status, TechAx accounting, authentication. So I'm going to actually select one of the index pattern called MNT analytics system status, ACS view timestamp, create an index pattern. And these are the fields available in that index. So you could see that radius authentication, CPU count, CPU utilization, the IO utilization, memory utilization, so on and so forth. So these are the fields available in that index pattern to query on. You can create one more index pattern, something like MNT analytics ISE process count status, which gives the process information of the ISE. When I say process, you might be wondering, sometimes the customers were asking for, hey, how do I know when the process got failed on my specific ISE node? So you could even get to know from the Kibana, and you can create your own dashboard using this MNT analytics process status index pattern. So create your own dashboard by going to the dashboard and add a visualization, create a visualization. Under Kibana, it's called a visualization. Where select the index pattern, I wanted to select a radius authentication index pattern, and I wanted to plot a bar horizontal stacked graph. Basically, I wanted to show on a day-to-day basis how many users getting authenticated with the different protocols. So I wanted to break it down using the protocol. So you could clearly see by time-wise graph, the lookups are 6, deep authentication, ASCII, and other protocols being used by each and every user. That's how I can create my visualization. If I like this visualization, I can save it, and I can add more visualization as well. Create one more visualization, select the MNT radius authentication. This time select the donut. This time I wanted to know the policy set versus the user. So this was specifically looking for the users matching with the policy set. So most of my users are getting matched with the guest access policy set. So I can create the panel title. I can create the panel title for the next panel as well. And I can add one more visualization based on the process also. Say, for example, if I wanted to understand the database listener is up and running or not, I wanted to plot or give a table. So I wanted to understand the database process, whether it is up and running, whether the PassiveID service is up and running. And this is going to be most interesting one, the RabbitMQ. The RabbitMQ, whether it is up and running. So this gives beautiful information about the table, on the each and every process running status. Now, if I wanted to create a visualization based on the posture, let's say I'm going to select the radius authentication index pattern. This time I want metric, and based on the posture count, status count is what I wanted to define. So there are 3 unique endpoints going through the posture count. So you can modify the display name, the total posture count, hit count in the last 30 days, save and return. So that's how basically you can create your own visualization. And in order for you to create custom visualizations, you can also do that by going to the visualization library. Create your own visualization based on the aggregated matrix, create a gauge graph based on the radius authentications. Now, in this, I wanted to basically, I'm gonna do it a little bit faster here. Select the index pattern. The authentication protocol is what I wanted to make use of. For the last 30 days, if you look at it, the authentication protocols is laid out very beautifully, and it was giving me, hey, there are lookups authentication protocol that was the most used one in my environment. So I can give it a name to this visualization if I want. And I can put it into the existing dashboard, or I can just add it to the library, or I can add it to the new dashboard. I don't want to add it at this point of a time. Save it into the library, and you can create your own new visualization. Again, based on the radius authentication. And this time, the identity source is what I was making, identity store is what I'm making use of. So there are radius authentications happening mostly against the internal endpoints, 268 from the Active Directory, against SCCM Active Directory 23 endpoints, and the 3 radius authentication records found from the guest users database. So that's how basically you can create your own visualization. You can add it to the library, save it, give it a name. I'm gonna be advancing it a little bit. Once after adding it, you can go to your own dashboard that you created, and you can add it from the library as well. So type a name, hit count. So from the visualization library that we have saved, let's select hit count per authentication protocol, and it gets added automatically. I think it got added at multiple times. So let's add another visualization that we added earlier. Hit count for the policies authenticate ID store. Look at that. So that's how basically you can create your own dashboard, do the log analytics from the ISE straight away without depending on the Stealth Watch or a Splunk kind of tools. So that's what the log analytics. So I wanted to skip this question at this point of time. I wanted to go and quickly go through the other remaining features very quickly. I'm going to take another 5 minutes. Just bear with me. Most of the customers were looking for actually a small form factor, even smaller than the small VM machine. That was the reason why we introduced this extra small virtual machine, where the customer's footprint is much lesser than the small one. The extra small virtual machine needs to have 8 CPUs, 32 GB RAM, and 300 GB. And it should be deployed as a PSN form factor only, and it is available in the VM mode, available at this point of time, but not available in the physical form factor. It is not available in the cloud form factor as well. Now, single entity for the endpoints with a GUID. What exactly this is? When the endpoints are connecting to the network, more and more iOS devices, Android devices, and Apple devices are connecting to the network with the randomized MAC addresses. When they are connecting to the network with the different MAC addresses, ISE was referring so far the MAC address as the uniqueness, and it was referring the same endpoint with the different MAC addresses. That means you will have multiple entries for the same endpoint because we were referring the MAC address as the uniqueness earlier. But with this feature, what we were introducing here is the endpoints which are going through the BYOD and MDM. Whenever the endpoint gets onboarded through the BYOD, gets a certificate provision from the ISE, having the UDID imprinted under the SAN field, or if the endpoint was provisioned with a certificate from the MDM itself, has the UDID value in the subject alternative name or a common name. Those UDIDs, basically, once after onboarding, these endpoints are going to get connected to the network using the certificate-based authentication. So when ISE gets that certificate from the endpoint, from the certificate, ISE retrieves the UDID information, and ISE refers that UDID as the uniqueness going forward. So no matter what, within the same endpoint connects to the network with the different MAC addresses, as long as the certificate was having the same UDID value, it's going to show as a single entity, as one single endpoint. That's basically what this feature was. The next feature was talking about when the customer was making use of a multiple MDM for you to integrate with when IEC was integrated with multiple MDM partners. So far, we were asking the customer to create or differentiate those MDM vendors and the endpoints going through those MDM vendors. Let's say, as an example, if my endpoints in this San Jose or a US location were managed by the Intune, and in my India location, all the endpoints are being managed from mobile or an MDM. So the location is being the differentiating factor for you in that example. Let's take another example, something like all my Windows machines are managed from Intune, whereas Android and iOS devices are managed from mobile app. So endpoint profile is becoming the uniqueness for you to define the authorization policies to let ISC to query specific MDM and get the compliance information so far. But that was making the customer a little difficult to write the policies when they were migrating from one MDM vendor to another MDM vendor. Or if the endpoint is getting newly connected to the network, you don't even know whether it is being managed by the Intune or a mobile item, so MDM vendor 1 or MDM vendor 2. So in such kind of cases, you could basically enable this MDM UEM multi-MDM authorization workflow to fall back to the another MDM store. Basically, you're going to enable this setting when the endpoint is not registered with the first MDM in the list. It's going to query the second MDM vendor. If at all it is not found in the second MDM vendor, it's going to go to this third MDM vendor that you got integrated with. So that's how it's going to basically check in the multiple MDM partners to look for the registration status, to look for the compliance information from the MDM partners to give the compliance or non-compliant differentiated privileges to the endpoints. That's the power of the multi-MDM authorization feature. The last feature that I'm going to talk about is a passive ID enhancement. So far, you can integrate, I mean, you can rely on the passive ID. You are basically enabling the passive ID to get the user Active Directory, device information, so on and so forth from the identity sources passively. Can you create an authorization policies based on those passive ID information? So far, no. That was making difficult to deploy ISE in an SD-WAN world where you wanted to associate different SGTs based on the passive information, even in the FMC use case. That was the reason why now we have introduced this passive ID enhancement to create your own authorization policy based on the passive ID groups or based on the passive ID provider or based on the passive ID usernames. You can create your own authorization policy based on these conditions to uh, to give authorization profiles or an SGT as part of an enforcement. So that's the last feature I'm going to go with. So we ran out of time. If you're interested in beta, you can subscribe to this beta. And Rico is going to paste the link there. And these are the resources which are available for you to make use of. With that, thanks for your patience. I ran out of the time around the 20 minutes, but I hope the demonstrations were making it meaningful for you to understand the features that I'm talking about. Thanks.